As previously mentioned, I scheduled a DEXA scan in order to get my body composition done. I have been using a scale in order to measure the different components of my body composition, and I wanted to get the gold standard and also do a comparison between what my body scale says and what the DEXA scan says. I recently bought a new scale, and I've been comparing that to the scale that I've been using for the last 6 years or so. The old scale that I have been using, of course, it measures weight, but it also measures lean mass, bone mass, and fat mass in both percentages and pounds. It also measures vascular age. What it doesn't measure is visceral fats, BMR. So I've been comparing that old scale to this new scale to see the differences. And while the weights have been similar, the other components such as the lean mass, the fat percentages have been vastly different. So I scheduled this DEXA scan, and this is something that I wish I would have done at the start of my journey, and also something I wish that I known that I could have done. It's not something that I was aware that you can just go to a facility and schedule it and get it done. I thought it was like a medical thing that needed to go through insurance and whatnot. So once I found out that it could be done just off the cuff of me just paying out of pocket for it, I started looking around for different places in order to accomplish that. The cheapest one that I found was $139 in my area. So this was done at DEXA. The process was real simple, real painless. Signed up online, paid my fee. I think the whole procedure from the scan to going over the results with the technician took a total of less than 20 minutes. The scan itself was probably less than 10 minutes. It probably took me longer to actually drive to the facility than the entire process. So I got the scan done. I got some interesting results, and I was able to compare those results to both of my scales, and those were interesting in themselves. So I'll go over the results of the scan, and I'll put some pictures of the scan itself or the report up on the screen so you can follow along at key points. I'll start with the visceral adipose tissue, or VAT. That was measured at 1.82 pounds, and they say that should be less than 1 pound. So I'm 0.82 pounds above where I should be. Another measurement was the android guy note ratio, and mine was at 1.55, and it should be less than 0.9. So I'm over on those two components. Now, the interesting thing is the other components of the scan, which gave me my total body weight, my body composition. It did a differential comparison between the left side of my body and my right side of the body. And that's where things got interesting. I had a hip replacement done in 2020 on my right side, and I think 10 years before that, in 2010, I had a SI joint fusion. So I have two different components of hardware on the right side of my body, and that messed with the scan as far as determining my overall body weight and the different weights within the categories and the percentage of fat. Now, my arm differential were even on both left and right side, and that was also the same with my trunk, but my left and right leg were rated differently. So what the scan showed is that I had 0.8 pounds difference in weight between my left leg and my right leg. My left leg was measured at 8 pounds, and my right leg was measured at 7.2 pounds. And that's in terms of fat. In terms of lean weight, my right leg was measured at 26.8 pounds, while my left leg was measured at 31.7 pounds, which is a difference of 4.8 pounds. And then in terms of bone mass, my right leg had 1.4 pounds, and my left leg had 1.6 pounds. So that's a difference of 0.2 pounds. In all, my left leg was measured at 5.9 pounds heavier than my right leg. So that threw my scan off. And what I did is, before I had the scan, I did some Google searches to determine how the scan would handle the equipment within my leg, particularly my hip. And they told me the results came back and said that the scan should include that hardware into the lean mass components of the scan, but it doesn't seem like that was the case. I don't know if I needed to tell the technician prior to the scan that I had this hardware in my body. There was nothing on the intake forms asking those questions, but the net result is that it threw my scan off. So my overall weight was measured at 228.6 pounds. and that put my fat in pounds at 53.9, my lean weight at 167 pounds, and my bone weight at 7.7 pounds. So that put my fat percentage at 23.6 pounds. And the 228.6 pounds was interesting to me because I weighed myself before going to the facility on both the scales. My older scale, the Withings, measured me at 233.7 pounds, while my newer scale, the Eufy, measured me at 234.1 pounds. So if I put the differentials back into my weight, if I add the 0.8 pounds that was the differential between my left and right leg back into my weight, if I add the 4.8 lean pounds back into differential between my left and right leg back into my weight, and if I add the 0.2 differential between my left and right leg back into my weight, that moves me to 234.4 pounds. So that's in line with my scales. My Withing scale has me at 233.6. So that's a little bit over a pound difference between the DEXA Scan and the Withings body cardio scale. And the Eufy scale has me at 234.1. So that's just a difference of 0.3 of a pound. So very, very close on the Eufy scale. And by doing that, that raises the weight of my fat from 53.9 pounds to 54.7 pounds. It raises my lean mass weight from 167 to 171.8. And it raises my bone from 7.7 to 7.9. And that changes my percent of fat to 23.6%. So how does that compare to my scales? Now, my Withing scale is, in terms of body composition, is vastly different from the Eufy scale and from the DEXA Scan. The Withing scale, which is the body cardio, has my fat weight at 31 pounds, my lean weight at 193.7, and my bone weight at 8.9 pounds. So that's a total of 233.6. So that puts my body fat percentage at 13.3%. So vastly different from the DEXA Scan. Now the Eufy puts my fat weight at 55.9 pounds, my lean weight at 169.3 pounds, my bone weight at 8.5 pounds, and my total weight at 234.1, which gives me a fat percentage of 24%. So very close to the DEXA Scan numbers. I found that to be interesting. Now, I want to pop in and highlight something that I realized when I was putting this particular chart together, is that the eufy numbers do not equal that 234.1. I believe it equals like 233.7. So I was a little bit confused as to why there's a discrepancy in the numbers. So I did an export of the data, and apparently it doesn't round. Export the data to a CSV out of the app, it sends you an email, and it goes out to 2 decimal points, and fat mass is listed as 55.9, but if we export the data, it's listed as 55.99. So it doesn't round up, it just drops the second decimal place off. So that throws the numbers off from their total. So that's why there's a discrepancy. I just wanted to point that out if there's a data nerd out there that will notice that, like I do. Now the Withing scale is said to have a accuracy of within 0.2 pounds, while the Eufy scale has an accuracy rating of 0.1 pounds. So as we can see, Eufy scale was closer in determining my weight compared to the DEXA Scan, if we account for the differential that the scan could not account for based off of my hip replacement and the SI joint fusion. The Eufy scale is closer by a long shot when breaking down the fat, lean, and bone weights and the overall fat percentage compared to the overall weight. Generally speaking, the Eufy scale has been within 0.2 pounds of the Withing scale. So if I weighed in at 233.7 on the Withing scale, the Eufy scale would be 233.9. That has been consistent in my comparisons. And actually today when I weighed on the 2 scales, they had the same exact weight. There was no difference in the weight, only the composition components were different. Now, as you can see here on this part of the scan, you can see that it picks up the hip hardware, the hip replacement hardware. It shows on the scan, but for some reason it doesn't account for it in my body weight and the composition numbers. I hope to find out more about why that is. Maybe I need to tell them ahead of time so they can calibrate it differently when they do the scan. I've read some material that says it needs to compensate for that by scanning the forearm. So I'll find out more about that. Now, one thing I was disappointed in is that this scan did not include components that other users have had on their scans, things like BMR and things like comparison of population by age. That's something that I was looking forward to seeing. Subsequently, I did find a location that does include that data locally, but it does cost, it was $11 or $12 more to get the scan at that location than it does at the location that I went to. So eventually, I think what I will do is transfer my weigh-ins to the eufy scale at some point. I do want the components that the eufy scale gives me, things like BMR, things like visceral fat, protein number, a metabolic age. Now the withing scale gives me a vascular age, whereas the eufy scale does a metabolic age. I don't know what the difference is between the two. Now both these scales use a technology called bioelectrical impedance analysis, where it sends an electronic pulse through your body to determine these different body compositions. Now again, this is not the gold standard. However, eufy performed real well in this particular category. I was reluctant about buying it initially because I had never heard of this brand. Upon doing further research, what I was able to determine is that eufy is made by the company Anchor. And Anchor is a company that I use a lot for phone charging components, things like the charging block, charging cables, and things of that nature. And so those products have been extremely well made for me and last a long time. So I went ahead and purchased the eufy scale to give it a try. You can get it off of Amazon. I'll post a link to it in the description of the video. This will be an affiliate link if you want to take a swing at it. I think it is a real good scale overall in terms of the weight measurements and the body composition. It's easy. It was easy to set up via the app. You connect to it through a Bluetooth connection, and then you configure a Wi-Fi, so you don't have to connect your phone to it every single time you do a weigh-in. It automatically syncs to over the internet, and you can pull it up on the app to see your measurements. That's one thing I really like. I had previously looked at the Renfo scale, and I didn't go with that particular scale because it seemed like you had to connect your phone to it through the Bluetooth connection every single time you did a weigh-in. That would just be too cumbersome, especially coming from the withing scale, which has a Wi-Fi component that automatically syncs to the withing servers and then downloads to the app automatically. So that's one thing that I really liked about the scale. So I would say the overall winner between the two scales right now is the eufy scale. It gets me the closest to the DEXA Scan numbers, allowing for the DEXA Scan not including my overall body weight with the hip replacement. So that is my review of my DEXA Scan experience. Real quick, it was in and out. I got a 4-page report, and the only thing that it did not have was the other components, such as BMR, comparison to the population in your age group, things of that nature. My overall bone density was great. I had a YAT score of 1.1, so that was really good. So I will get another scan in a few months. I don't know if I'll go back to DexaFit or go over to the other place, because I want those other measurements to go along with it. And I'll have further conversations with the technician about how it's going to account for my hip replacement so I can get a more accurate scan. So like I said, accounting for that 5.9 pounds that it discounted me and my overall body weight based off of my right leg where the hardware was, if you account for that, the weight measurement was right in line with what I had measured right before I went to actually get the scan. So I found that to be real promising. So that's my review. That's where I'm at with it. I hope you all found it interesting. Feel free to comment. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get notifications of my future updates. Hope you all have a great day and night.